So, thank you very much. A warm welcome to all of you. For you who joined us already this morning, this is the second session in Business Sweden's concept this year in Almedalen, Follow the Sun Towards the Globe, trying to understand how to tackle changing conditions for sustainable business all over the world. I have the great honor to hosting this session covering first Middle East and then Europe. Janne Larsson, you can say hello and welcome. You are the host of this session, CEO of Business Sweden. And I am extremely happy to be joined on stage and also digitally by an extremely distinguished panel who's going to help us to sort out the opportunities, but also maybe the risks in these two unique regions. So first of all, hi to Masoud Biouki, who is the Trade and Invest Commissioner to the UAE and Market Area Director of Middle East. You're with us live from Dubai. Warm welcome to you. We also have Michelle Carlson, which is the Managing Director for NASDAQ in the Middle East and Africa, also joining us live. Welcome to you. And with me live on stage, please come up and join me. I have Tom Eriksson, the CEO of Alfa Laval, and also the Chairman of the Association for Swedish Engineering Industries. A big hand. And also, last but definitely not least, Malin Lindfors-Spese, who is the founder and CEO of Ethos International. Big hand for you as well. So let's kick this off. I'm going to start actually with you, Masoud, sitting right in the middle of where everything is happening in Dubai. Could you please give us a first sort of brief macro sentiment overview? What is happening in the region right now?
Good afternoon, everybody, from an extremely hot Dubai today. Thank you for having me. In terms of what is happening in the region at the moment, today, I would say is mainly two things at the moment. One is the Eid al-Adha that is taking place right now, which is the largest holiday celebrated in Islam. And beside that, it is a great deal of discussions and communications around the upcoming COP28, where King Charles, for instance, held the Climate Forum Roundtable with the UAE COP team yesterday. And the fact that COP is hosted in an oil and gas producing countries such as the UAE in the Middle East proves the region's ambitious to diversify.
And
one needs to remember.
Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry. No, I just want to continue to say that one needs to remember that the Middle East is one of the world's most vulnerable regions to the impact of climate change. It is clearly understood that building climate resilience and investing in new industries is the only way forward to ensure future prosperity, social stability, and global competitiveness.
And you actually started off answering my second question for you, and that is, what are the most interesting industries in your region right now, and where the sort of biggest opportunities for Swedish companies are located?
Yeah, if you allow me just briefly to give you the macro picture here. The Middle East is a heterogeneous region. It is currently characterized by a number of macro trends, and throughout the coming years, until the end of this decade, the region's development will be marked by major economic and social reforms. We will soon actually produce a report named the Decade of the Middle East, which I really encourage everybody to read. But with the current war in Europe and overall gloomy economic outlook for a large part of the world, the Middle East is one of the few regions globally that has a positive forecast for economic growth. In contrast to the region's historical reputation, the future looks increasingly stable. And to that, the green transition spurring both economic diversification away from oil and gas on one hand, and social adaptation for resilience and survival to cope with increasingly harsh effects of climate change on the other, is likely to take up more and more of this region's focus and investments in the short to medium term. The region's ongoing demographic shift, in which already a large young population is expected to continue to grow rapidly, will have further significant implications in the region with an increased demand for education, healthcare, and jobs. Coupled with increasing life expectancy, primarily in the region's wealthier economies, it is a recipe for change, putting more pressure on the regional healthcare system and government spending.
Okay, I think we'll stop there for now, Masoud. I will let you back into the conversation. Tom, Alfa Laval has major operations in this region, been there for a long time. Firstly, any comments on the macro sort of comments from Masoud? And I also would like you to comment. I mean, there is a large discussion right now on where to trade, where Swedish investments should go, and why Middle East is so interesting in this contest. But firstly, something on the macro.
Well, maybe I start with your second question and then
Please.
come to Masoud. I think when you're operating a global company in these times, the situation is dramatically different from how it's ever been. We always worked under the understanding that trade and culture and academics is building bridges towards cultures, and we were part of building the global community. Right now, the situation is somewhat different. We have a combination of the geopolitical clashes, which is forcing a dialogue about who is your friend and who is your foe, and if you're with us or not with us. And I think you talked about US, China earlier today, but that goes for the whole region here as well. The question of Iran is pretty clear. The question in terms of where is the rest of the region going, it's clearly a more pro-Russia view in the Middle East at the moment, which is creating some tensions around how trade sanctions and secondary sanctions will develop in the future. So there we have one issue that is complex for us to manage with. And the second issue is the public opinion side. We have a view of people in general that our business partners are the other democracies.
And you mean a view in Sweden or
well, I think this is a very international trend. It's in all of the Western, well, let's say it's a Western world phenomenon. The democracies in this world has entered a period of, let's call it intolerance to those who are not sharing our values. And it contradicts the history that we have of working and building those bridges as opposed to stepping out of it. So not only is there a sanction issue related potentially down the road to the Middle East, but there's also a reputational discussion, which I obviously don't tend to agree with very much, but that is sort of posing some question marks around how we form the future global companies and our activities in various regions of the world. And so I think that's a backdrop to the discussion that we are having here. When it comes to the dynamics in the Middle East today, I completely agree with Masoud. And I will put it in this word, because we come from, obviously, from the oil and gas history in the Middle East. And so all the Aramcos and ADNOCs and Qatar Gas and all of these companies that you hear and see about and who is buying football clubs, that's our old business partners. And if you think about the green transition, you're going to need a couple of things. You're going to need a huge cash flow because investments are significant, and they have it. You're going to have fast permission and strong decision making when it comes to permitting directions, future strategy in terms of on a national and regional level. They have it. You need experience from large-scale engineering projects and management. They have it. And you need access to cheap green energy, in this case mainly solar, and they will have it. And so, the way we see it, and we are active in almost all hydrogen, biofuel type of energy transition projects anywhere in the world. And our reading is that the Middle East will go first. And the first really large-scale hydrogen projects was put under project context in Saudi Arabia now just 6 months ago. It's about 20 billion US all in all, I think. It's the biggest so far. It's completely for export. So I think the comment is correct. They understand that 20 years from now, the revenues from oil and gas are not going to be there. And they have, especially Saudi, a huge population of youngsters that they need to
do
put
this
to work.
transition. But nevertheless, I mean, there is obviously huge business opportunities in this region now and going forward.
Yeah.
But still, you have the complexity, you have the human rights, you have all that to sort of take into consideration. So how has your de-risking strategies changed over time in this region?
It has not. And it does in terms of the business focus. Sort of, in our portfolio, the oil and gas is something we've said, well, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it's gone, it's fine. We are supporting the customers we have for as long. So from a product application point of view, it's a 180-degree change from 4 years ago to today. When it comes to our commitment and presence and direction with these large companies that will drive the change, we are 100% with them. And I think it's not a very wise strategy to wobble too much and try to make a moral judgment on every aspect. We think sanctions is an acceptable way for us to find a way to say we accept the political decisions as to what's doable or not. But to be the moral judgment on every single market is a very difficult thing for us with 140 markets. I can't have a screen of, very good to very bad and then draw a line somewhere. It's just an impossible thing. It doesn't mean let's share values about discriminations, let's share values about human abuse, let's share values about labor security. We don't. But we think trading is a better way to affect than not.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that because that's really interesting. We're just going to let Michelle into the conversation. Tom was mentioning there is huge opportunities. There is a huge need also capital. There is capital available in the region. But from your point of view, how can the capital market sector contribute to these opportunities? And is there a way to sort of push the world into some sort of better corner, or should you have a more sort of business-oriented view that Tom is sharing with us here right now?
Thank you for the interesting question. I actually tend to agree with both Tom and Masoud about how the development we see in our region. But looking at, I mean, it is an oxymoron to be in this rich oil and gas region that is taking the step toward being a driver in discussing environmental improvement and climate changes. So we see a number, from the capital market aspect point of view, we see a number of voluntary carbon markets being established in Egypt, in the UAE, in Saudi, and they are all really very keen to follow the standards and the rules and are chipping in to make the world a better place. We have seen from Saudi in particular, the MENA voluntary carbon market taking it a step further. They are creating a marketplace for the voluntary carbon market, but they are also engaging in the standards worldwide. Just a few weeks back, as an example, they actually had an auction selling 2.2 million tons of carbon credits in Kenya that were sold by Saudi companies, UAE companies, Egyptian companies, and etc. from the region. So they are actively working toward that direction in parallel with being actually the oil and gas producers as well. We see that the GCC is clearly taking this step to be in the front of these discussions. And from the Nasdaq perspective, I mean, as part of the ecosystem of the capital markets, we are the majority owner of Pure Earth. We are setting a standard how a typical stock exchange or a marketplace in our industry can actually be active and create something that will make the world a better place. The Pure Earth is a world-leading crediting platform for engineered carbon removal, which help to attract actually financing to the voluntary market. So the capital market is absolutely active in that segment. On another topic, we see that they have opened the door for improving in terms of which asset you can buy and sell, the investment and environment for the investors, whether it's retail or company, regional or international, has changed totally. They are investing in artificial intelligence, they are investing in machine learning to make the marketplace trustable and reliable.
Thank you so much for that insight, what's going on the capital markets connected to the region. I'm going to let you into the conversation, Malin. I mean, this is no easy questions, obviously, but your take on, if you look at the long-term sustainable business, all the opportunities in the Middle East, what is important to do and understand before starting, and of course, when doing business in the Middle East?
I would say it's understanding the context that, as Tom said, we may not have all the same values of the perception of the values, but there are some very fundamental values we do share. I mean, the Middle East are very committed to climate change, they are committed to biodiversity, circular economy, the labor issues and human rights issues. We do have a different view on how to take on these factors today. But I'd say one of the key things before going into any region is to do your homework, to a little bit understand that we may be naive coming from northern Western countries with our values and our perceptions. Therefore, the key is doing your due diligence. As you go in and do your financial due diligence, you do your technical due diligence, legal due diligence, this is where you need to do your environmental and human rights due diligence. I've had the pleasure of working with Masoud in the region UAE for human rights due diligence projects. Unfortunately, a little bit late, but my suggestion would be do not wait for the problems to appear on the step or doorstep, or that you read about them in media. If you go in with a human rights and environmental due diligence beforehand, you've gained a great understanding, you know your risks, but you can also gain a way to talk about your risks in the region with your partners, because they are very keen to learn, develop, and understand, and we've had very good success but you have to come in with the knowledge of your own risks from these perspectives and start working with them quite actively. There's great partners in the region. All of the large corporates are there with common goals to build. And understanding these environmental impact and the human rights impact, I think through trade and knowledge, you can really make a difference. But you have to really do your homework.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Masoud. I know you are also a firm believer of cooperation and help each other out, especially in this complex region. If you could sort of pass your top 3 tips or conditions for those who want to do business in the region you're heading.
Yeah, sure. And I will give you actually 5, because that's what you usually how we advise our
That's fine.
clients.
That's fine. Then you just need to shorten every tip if it's fine.
Yeah, and the first one, it goes very much in line with what Malin said. Do your homework. This is perhaps not a sensational advice, but really understanding the market and their perspective, could be cultural, social, economical, before you actually enter the market. In many cases, we see companies that have been approached, and they say they are very opportunistic rather than being strategic, having a strategic approach. But that's number 1. Number 2 is define and develop a strategy and start asset light to maintain a fast-paced change in the market conditions, so you can plan long-term and scale up when and if the business is growing. Number 3, ensure local interaction, extremely important. Invest in local presence, be it greenfield, joint venture, distribution channels, or what else, but you need to invest locally. Adapt your business model, your product, your service to the market conditions. And lastly, go long and be resilient. Invest in long-term relationship with the local stakeholders, government stakeholders, because as we all know, business is all about relationship, but even more so in this region. So you need to build that trust before you actually do the business.
Thank you very much. That was extremely concrete, so thank you so much. And if there are any companies in the audience, could be also smaller companies looking at the region, of course, they can reach out to you, Masoud. The only thing you need to say now is yes.
Yes, of course.
That's great news. Back to you, Michelle. Capital markets investing in the region. I mean, there is no secret that the world, unfortunately, are becoming more multipolar. How is the Middle East changing for companies with innovative technologies? We heard a lot about that, and also with sort of your scope on the capital market connected to it.
Yeah, thank you for that question as well. I would actually like to start by saying that Swedish companies have been setting a kind of standard in the Middle East. Stockholm Stock Exchange celebrates 160 years this year, and they have been a successful marketplace that have invested in technology and always on the front to find the best solution to run its own market, but also to provide it to other marketplaces around the world. We have 22 exchanges in the region that are using our technology because of the role model that Stockholm Stock Exchange has put forward. So that is very important. But the trends we see is the Middle East have an agenda to be the hub, attracting businesses, all branches, not only capital markets, not only technology, all branches. And we see this race between Saudi and the UAE, which could be good in its own way. It actually doesn't matter which sector you are in, as long as you bring in fruitful and sustainable results to the community. There is a large investment in modern technologies. Just between 22 and 23, there were 1,800 plus companies registering in this crypto oasis, which is a copy of Silicon Valley for crypto markets and NFTs. So that's another 1,800 companies attracted to the UAE. As I said before, the stock exchanges are embarking on new asset classes, modernizing their technologies, and all of that is a clear signal from the region that they want us to come, they want us to be part of the game if we have a sustainable solution to provide. So it's quite exciting and interesting. I've been living in the Middle East for 16 years and in Dubai for 14, and the journey is just amazing to follow.
That's a great ending to that answer. Thank you very much, Michelle. And going back to you, Tom, well, what is the next step in this region now? Which opportunities should Swedish companies not miss out on, and how to get there?
I think the big question now is whether Middle East will become also a production hub, especially Saudi Arabia.
What do you think?
I think there's still some way to go. It is still I think the only place. The issue with Saudi Arabia and Middle East has been, it's never been the big market like India or China. And so as a huge hub, it's been problematic in terms of trade restrictions between the countries within the region, the infrastructure, the visum requirement. It's been too tedious to really put cash into major production hubs. I think Saudi Arabia is changing dramatically, and that will be the country where everybody will go. So I don't see it happening large scale this year, next year, but potentially 5 years down the road, we will see capital influx substantially into Saudi.
Time will tell. Really interesting. Same question to you, Malin, from your point of view. What is the next step in the region? And I mean, you had a very sort of pedagogical answer to what to think about and how to work, but anything to add to that, what to think about to sort of grasp the opportunities going forward in the region?
I think if you can come with a sustainable sort of perspective, including the environment, but also bringing in the gender issue, women's issue, labor rights issues, human rights issues, and really saying, this is the way we feel we should work together. And if you can have that dialogue and really have a dialogue, I think that's the way that's going to strengthen the region. I think it's going to be critical for the region to be able to have the conversations on gender equality, on migrant labor, on human rights issues. And if they can take up that and there's really a productive dialogue, I think it's a great way for the region. If not, there's trouble ahead.
Anything you want to add, Michelle, to what Tom and Malin just said?
No, I fully agree. And I think any company that wants to invest and come to the region have to do their homework, as Malin said. We have a fantastic support from Business Sweden that should be utilized. And I can only say that your technology, your innovations does not matter as much as the trust you build. And you build that trust by being there and engaging with the culture.
Thank you, Masoud Biouki. You are the Trade and Invest Commissioner and also the Market Area Director for Middle East for Business Sweden. You will have the final words. What's the next step coming up in the region and how to grasp those possibilities for Swedish companies?
Thank you. I think a lot have been said, and what we see, there is definitely a drive for diversification, both in terms of diversifying from the oil and gas as we've been discussing, but also understanding that the region itself is very much vulnerable for the climate change. So that is happening, and Sweden and Swedish companies with their climate smart technology and leading know-how has a great opportunity. What is important to remember, though, is that don't only bring the solutions. What we can see more and more is that the region, and especially countries such as Saudi Arabia, as was mentioned, they want the knowledge. They want to build together for the better good of both sides. So you need to come with a kind of holistic solution, not only with your goods and services.
Okay, and I will actually cope with the instant feedback moment that my moderator colleague Beata used this morning. Was this interesting for you in this room? Hands up. It looks so. Good job. Thank you so much for the panel, both digital and physical, covering the Middle East. Now, obviously, the sun is also up in Europe. It's quite hot in here. We're going to change the perspective. We're going to move from the Middle East into the heart of Europe and continue this, from my perspective, extremely interesting conversation on stage. So please, maybe you should sort of make sure you have water because it's quite hot. Up here on stage, and we're going to have change of panel. So digitally, I will be joined by Arantxa Gonzalez, which these days are the Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po in Paris. So she used to be the foreign minister and also the Minister for EU Affairs and Cooperation in Spain. She will soon join us digitally. We will also be joined by Johan Frisk, the CEO and founder of Opiflex, digitally. And on stage, I'm happy to welcome Yvonne Pernaud, who are the Vice President for Europe for Business Sweden, and also Daniel Lundgren, the Vice President and Commercial Director for Siemens Energy. So a big hand for all the new panelists, a new distinguished panel with a lot of knowledge about a region maybe a bit closer to heart, Europe. So I think we're going to just wait to see if the screen will start. And have like 1 minute to fill up our glasses with some water. Please make sure you have something to drink. We don't want anyone to faint on the stage.
Will be the first, maybe. Oh.
You want some water, Yvonne? Det är bra, tack. Jag drack.
Oops. So.
Well, see, no See My Digital seminar without a little bit of technical struggle, right? But I think it will work soon. Here we go. Yeah, seems like it's about Europe. Here we go. Seems like the right backdrop, right? Let's see if our digital members of the panel are connected. They seems to be, but I think Johan and Arantxa needs to sort of change presentation. Oh well, I think it's pretty clear who is Arantxa and who is Johan, even though the text is on the wrong picture.
That's right.
So Johan, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
And I can hear you. Perfect. Arantxa, most welcome to the panel. Do you hear me?
I can. Do you hear me?
I hear you perfectly. Now we have a pretty good prerequisites to get this panel about how to tackle changing conditions for sustainable business in Europe going. I'm actually going to start with you, Yvonne. Could you give us a brief macro or some sort of sentiment overview? What's going on in the EU right now? I mean, obviously there is a lot connected to the Green Deal, to the focus on strategic and economy being in the middle. Someone said we're not in the middle of China and US. We are our own market, balancing in the middle and so forth. There's so much to say, but please give us sort of what's going on right now.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think I've got the fun region to talk about right now, because I think if you are to talk about Europe at any time, this is the time. So I've used there's a wall painting in Brussels that says the future is Europe. So I've started using that in my internal comms to the team, because I think there's so much going on in Europe right now. And we, as Sweden, you saw we have 75% of export going to Europe already. So obviously it's a big market. But there's so many changes going on in Europe where we as Swedes are in the lead. Where it comes to green transition, where it comes to digital innovation, there's so much we can do. So I think the future for Europe right now is brilliant. So that's the starting point.
That's a very good start.
If you want me to elaborate, I think everything that goes on with the pandemic and obviously Ukraine has moved focus. I think we are still talking about a global world, but we are also talking about the regional world. So we
Sorry
see...
for being a bit messy, but you need to stand over here so we can see the digital participants as well.
Sorry.
There we go, sorry.
So I see a lot of things moving back to Europe, maybe not moving out of China, but also setting up in Europe. The second plant, the reshoring. Ukraine has actually showed us that EU can collaborate. It has brought the countries together in a completely new way. We can collaborate fast if needed. So there's a lot of good things going on. There's still obviously regulations within EU. But I heard Ursula von der Leyen saying that she's going to put efficiency demands on all processes in the EU, and they should decrease by 25%. If that happens, something good is going on in the EU. So I think the opportunities are huge. On the worrying side, I would put obviously the economy. Our continent is the one with the lowest economical forecasts, and we see some countries going backwards. We have the investment scheme that is important right now, and we see the US and China taking the lead and Europe slipping behind. And this is the biggest worry, I think, on the map today, that we need to get companies and countries to invest in Europe. We heard Martin Lundstedt, if you listened to him previously, talking about it's not about choosing where to invest, it's about investing in both places, but it's important that Europe gets the first investment, because when you get the first investment, you get the innovation that spins around. So it's important that the first investment comes to Europe. So that's the introduction.
Very good, thank you, Yvonne. I'm going to let you in, Arantxa, to that macro overview discussion as well. What's your take on the situation right now in the European market? I mean, today you represent academia, but you used to be the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation and EU Affairs for representing Spain. What's your take on this?
So I think I very much agree with our colleague on her description. But if I had to think of the three big themes that European business, and in particular Swedish business, need to take into account, it would be number one, to make sure that there is a clear understanding that globalization is changing, that there is much more state participation in the economy than in the past, that security concerns are higher on the agenda of the trade actors or economic policy makers, and that there are more restrictions that are being implemented as a result of security concerns. All of this means that in this new phase of globalization, it's a bit more inflationary, it's going to be a little bit more costly. There is no less globalization. There continues to be globalization, but it's taking a different shape. And I think the important message for businesses in Sweden is to make sure they have a say in the shaping of the governance of this new globalization. Number two, I would say for Europe, it's all about, and for European businesses and Swedish businesses, it's all about competitiveness. This is the concern number one. This means innovation in the energy transition, in the climate transition, innovation in the technology space. And for Europe, this means investing much more into building the skills of our people. Because at the end of the day, we have a big asset, which is the skills that we need to be able to better leverage. The third thing I would say is that inequalities and dealing with inequalities is hugely important for businesses today, and for them to give this message is very important, because inequalities reduce the scope to keep markets open, reduce the legitimacy for opening markets. So these big three things, globalization is changing. Please, let's make sure that we have a say in the shaping it. Let's have a big agenda on competitiveness, and let's make sure that we deal with inequalities, because otherwise the pressure to close markets, to go protectionist, will be much higher.
Thank you very much, Johan Frisk. You have founded one of these successful and innovative companies in Sweden that are sort of looking for the next step, doing business abroad. Very interesting to hear your reflection on what Yvonne and Arantxa has said. But firstly, can't you just give us the elevator pitch? What does OpenFlex do, if there is someone who doesn't know that?
Thank you very much.
The short elevator pitch.
OpenFlex solve the challenge of automating high mix and low volumes, and we help small companies to global groups to increase flexibility and competitiveness while creating more stimulating work tasks. We created our solution initially for small medium enterprises, but now we are helping a lot of global companies to increase their flexibility and creating more future-proof solutions.
Thank you very much. And what is your take on, I mean, I guess you are sort of thinking and making plans as we speak on the next step for OpenFlex. What is your reflection on the situation in EU now compared to, for example, another market where to penetrate next?
Yeah, I believe I totally agree. Improved sustainability has become more increased in the last couple of years, been more important. The first trend we saw was bringing back manufacturing to Europe and Americas from Asia to increase flexibility due to the megatrend high mix and low volume. And this has increased, especially after COVID. But now a lot of companies are focusing more to improve sustainability, because that is also a competitive advantage. And we just got a large order from a global OEM a couple of weeks ago, as they wanted to increase their flexibility and sustainability by using our flexible mobile robot and robot pool features to maximize their use of robots and creating a future-proof solution. So I totally agree.
Thank you. And Daniel, also representing a company with a major exporting potential going forward, at the same time as you already are a large player established with a large R&D budget as well. Couldn't you also give us the elevator pitch? I mean, Siemens Energy, what do you do? The short elevator pitch, also for you.
Short one. Okay, and maybe then focusing on what we do out of Sweden, which we are, of course, a global conglomerate, but we have a big base in Sweden where we have end-to-end capabilities, so which results in some 1% of the global export of Sweden, 2% of the export outside of EU, which we think will change now over time. So we have some 500 people in R&D, 3,000 people coming to work every day, working with balancing the grid with power generation based on turbines. And for us, of course, listening to innovation is important, transforming energy system, we need skills, and time is now. I mean, my colleague was on the Hydrogen Summit yesterday, speaking about now is the time to take the advantage of this. And for us, this is a time where we can really scale up from Sweden.
Interesting to see that you see these opportunities. Do you see any challenges, or have you post-COVID, we have a war going on in our near sort of region. Have you made any changes in your de-risking strategies and something like that?
I mean, our equipment and technology is needed if you want to come out of the crisis. So, I mean, we are in Ukraine today. We are in the countries that are coming out of crisis or are in crisis, supporting the grids. But for us, the changing environment, and maybe we'll come to that a bit later also, is, today Sweden has a very luxury position because we have hydropower. A lot of other countries don't, and they will have to find their way on the balancing. And we spoke earlier about Middle East, where Saudi will produce hydrogen. In Europe, it's a lot about how we utilize it. And we see big investment decisions being taken in Germany. So Germany is both our owners and a big market for us. And this will be really great opportunities for Sweden as an export and to fix energy transition in Germany. But we need to accelerate R&D efforts out of Sweden to take this market going forward.
Very much in line with what you said initially, Yvonne. If we move on and become a bit more concrete, what's your top 3 conditions or tips to send to companies interested in continue or start doing business in Europe going forward? What do you need to understand to grasp the opportunities?
But I think Europe is, from our perspective, the easy market to go to. It's the first market you go to when you start your export journey. But I think still what you need to think about is that you still need to cooperate with other companies, especially if you're a small company, a startup, a scale-up. You can piggyback on the big ones. So you need to be on the right arenas, and you need to work in collaborations. Europe needs to go through the green transition now. They've got big targets set. There's quite a rush, and then we need to create big systematical changes, and then you can do that together. So I think that's the big opportunity for Swedish companies now to try to join forces for the big pitches. Otherwise, it's the same advice as for other markets. Understand what you're doing, do the analysis before you go in there. Know sort of your enemy, but know your market as well. It's the natural step to start.
Back to you, Arantxa. You were fairly concrete already in what you said initially, but anything you want to add? I mean, you used to be the Minister for EU cooperation representing Spain. How is the cooperation going on right now in Europe? What's the status in the cooperation field?
I mean, if there is one thing where Europe has to cooperate better, and I like to focus these final remarks there, is on skills. We need a big alliance between universities, businesses, investors, and governments to make sure that we have the skills that the market is requiring, but also that those skills can be brought to the market. We have great brains in Europe, but the amount of the innovation they generate that goes to market and that is monetized is lower than in other places like the US, for example. So a big alliance on skills building for markets, for innovation, for competitiveness is what I would be wanting to see more forcefully in Europe.
You are nodding heavily, Johan. Please, anything you want to add to what Arantxa said?
Yeah, I believe, I mean, it's very important for being an innovative company to get good support. I mean, to reach the market with the innovation costs about 10 times as much as doing the development. And bringing in investors in the early stage is often problematic. So if you don't get in the right investors, often with lack of long-term view, you may have a problem. And as said, U.S. investors often want to have the companies come to the U.S. So I think that if you compare to other countries like Denmark, Holland, France, and so on, it's more difficult in Sweden to get soft money for higher TRL levels. Governments like Vinnova is giving out a lot of money for each research at low TRL levels that often maybe is very strategic, but don't always have a real customer need. So in order to do so, my advice is to allow for soft money for high TRLs in other countries, and also have some favorable loans for innovative startups without personal guarantees. So we can bring on loans instead of bringing investors.
There's some very concrete on the funding side. Interesting. Well, time flies when you have so interesting conversation on stage. I would very much like to touch upon the energy transition and the state aid situation we have both in the EU and also in the US. Is there a sort of, and now we need short answers because I'm very interested in all of you, how you look upon this. State aid to sort of drive the green transition in Europe, business opportunities, risks, anything you want to say about that, starting with you, Daniel.
I mean, state aid is driving a lot of the investments our customers are doing, and we need to follow up with accelerating our technology applications, innovations, R&D activities to meet the acceleration that's going on. Because for us, state aid is what is driving a lot of the on the investment side, so where we can deploy our technology. So we just need to cope up.
Johan, please, your take on the situation right now on trying to boost the green transition using state aids and what business opportunities it gives.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we need to cooperate in Sweden between companies and universities and have a good balance between long-term research, but also focus on helping to solving the end user challenges that are real challenges and not have like super high visionary things that may never ever reach the market.
Arantxa, anything from your side touching upon state aid and what's going on right now?
Well, injections of public financing to foster the climate transition and to foster the technology revolution are needed. On the climate side, if I take the EU, it is doing this already in an amount that is probably more than what the US is doing. So, but the matter to me is not whether or not we provide state aids. We are providing it and we need to provide it. The question is how we do that. And I think there Europe has chosen one way and the US has chosen another one. The EU has chosen the way of doing this in a manner that is not trade distorting, in a manner that is not creating unfair competition. Whereas the US is doing this in a manner that is creating unfair competition, in particular for Europe, in a manner that is against the rules of the World Trade Organization. So I think the discussion is not whether or not the state aids, but how to do that. In Europe, we do this in a manner that is not trade distorting, because we have to ensure we do not compete with each other within the European Union common market. So let's try to push a little bit the US in that direction. That would be my suggestion.
I don't know if there are any politicians in the room, but that was a very concrete thing to take away, a concrete takeaway from your Arantxa. Well, Yvonne Panod, you are the Vice President for Europe, representing Business Sweden. You will have the final words. Looking at state aid and all the sort of opportunities it comes with for innovative companies in Sweden.
Well, I think I just have to conclude on the state aid, and you sort of gave me the punchline, because being Swede, looking at the state aid in the US and China, we're not, it's a little bit uncomfortable. So I think in Sweden we do the perfect match, and that's by giving money to bodies like us, because we are half state, Business Sweden, same with Vinnova. So that's the way the Swedish government try to support innovation and Swedish businesses. So I think that's the final answer on that.
Thank you very much, all of you in this very distinguished panel. Thank you so much for you in the audience. And please be with us again at 3 o'clock. The sun will rise in North America, and we will continue the same discussion focusing on North America. A big hand for the panel. Thank you very much.